West Germany. You are looking now at Eugenia Golea of Bucharest, Romania. She is 18 years of age, and as you can see, she claimed the silver medal at the recently held World Championships in the vaulting event.
And she can vault. She does a round-off entry vault, round-off, back handspring, layout Tsukahara. Little hop back, but look how easily she made that vault.
Her preliminary score was 9.9. She is chasing her teammate, whom you saw in our last segment, who received a 19.726.
Here it is, the round-off, back handspring. Great push off the horse. And to lay out Tsukahara off, and she's got so much air time, she kind of takes a nice little hop back. Of course, that's a deduction. But a gymnast like Golea can really take advantage of this round-off vault. She may not have the sheer power of a gymnast like Mary Lou Retton, and yet by doing this round-off vault, she really adds a lot to it.
Now, Golea needs at least a 9.85 for an average to defeat her teammate. Remember, Silevash has a 19.726 total, and if she's to beat that, Golea needs a 9.85.
And the typical pattern for a gymnast in vaulting finals is to do a more difficult vault, and so of course I would say that she's probably going to try this with a full twist.
Golea is coached by Lucia Marcoux. We saw him consulting with her between vaults. And she is ready now for her second vault. Again, the two vaults will be averaged together. That average plus yesterday's score will be totaled to determine the winner in this event.
And with a full twist, excellent vault. Took that hop, but that's going to be probably the vault of the night. That was a great, great exercise.
Was it better than 9.85, the average of the two?
We'll have to see. Here's the round-off entry again. A foot flop, good repulsion right there off the horse, and goes right into the twist. She makes it so easily, has a lot of air time.
And there's her score, 9.88. So she right now is in first place in the women's vaulting competition here at the DTB Cup. Eugenia Golea, the 18-year-old from Bucharest. And now let's move over to the men's pommel horse competition, where Vladimir Shapachkin of the Soviet Union is ready to compete. His preliminary score, 9.7. He needs a 9.95 to beat the two East Germans, Vella and Kroll.
No, I wouldn't really say that pommel horse is Shapashkin's best event, but he just gets the job done. He's very, very powerful. Works up on one pommel, moving across the horse. A lot of single pommel work there. Back more, back more, back more on one pommel. Here's his flare. Takes it up to a handstand. And back into a scissor sequence. That's a little bit awkward. Now he sets up for his dismount. You don't have to do as many scissors as you used to in competition because the judges realize it's just kind of a filler skill. A lot of single pommel work there at the end before his dismount.
Now, you just told me something I didn't know. Really, the scissors work is filler. But that, to me, looked very difficult.
No, it really isn't the most difficult skills. You can make it look exceptional. Now, here's that kind of an awkward flare sequence. He goes up to the handstand and kind of stops up there. You're technically really not supposed to stop. But he's very tough, and he really hits his routine. Here's his dismount again. This is his flare up to a handstand. Now the gymnasts don't just go to a handstand. They like to do some sort of a little turn. And that's pretty hard to do, actually, a full turn from that flare.
9.7 was his preliminary score, and 9.7 is today's score. His total, 19.4, way off the pace of the leaders, Vella and Kroll of East Germany. Now let's swing back to women's vaulting competition. This is Wang Xiaoyang of China. Preliminary score, 9.8.
Now, for some reason, Chinese gymnasts haven't really been very, very powerful on vault. But they have improved. And she does a Tsukahara with a full turn. She kind of tucked her knees in just a little bit too soon, but it was still a pretty good vault. Watch her knees. She hits the board. And instead of letting her heels come up to give her some extra lift, she kind of tucks them in a little bit too soon in that twist.
Now her average has to be 9.95. That means it pretty much has to be a perfect vault.
Yeah, it really does. And that hop, of course, will just give it away right there. That's at least a 1/10 of a point.
And when I say it has to be a 9.95, I'm of course referring to the gold medal, which is at stake. The score that she wants to beat belongs to Eugenia Golea of Romania. 19.782 is Golea's total score.
Now, Leander, we talked about the round-off vault. They're trying to figure out a way to allow men to do the round-off vault. It's difficult because their horse is placed the other way. Right. And so they're talking about building an entirely new vaulting surface for them to vault off of.
Just for the men?
Just for the men. But it might be for the women also.
If they were to redesign the horse, as you suspect they will, when would this change take place?
It might take place as soon as 1989, right after the Olympics. Here's a layout souk full. And she stuck the landing. That's a much better vault. She kind of piked in at the end. I noticed something with her hand. Watch in slow motion. She kind of takes her hand to kind of pull that pike in instead of leaving it free. Here's the layout Tsukahara, full twist. And watch that one hand come down, and it pulls in on her right leg.
Wang Xiaoyang receiving a 9.8 in the preliminary scores, gets a 9.819 for a total of 19.6. And now let's join in progress Csaba Fajkus of Hungary.
Now, Csaba isn't necessarily the prettiest pommel horse worker, but he's really tough. He just kind of makes it through his routines, always gets good, consistent scores. There's his dismount of flare to a handstand.
9.7 was his preliminary score. That'll be combined with the score they give him for the routine that you just saw.
Here's the flares. Very good flares. Traveling down to the end of the horse. A flare has become such a stock skill. About 50% of routines now you see are done in flare.
Csaba Fajkus receives a 9.775, giving him a total of 19.475. So he does overtake Vladimir Shapachkin. The results for women's vaulting competition show Eugenia Golea receiving the gold medal. Daniela Silvas takes the silver. On the pommel horse, Mike Bella and Sylvia Kroll tie for first place. Leander Riley along with Peter Vidmar, and the athletes have now rotated from the pommel horse and vaulting to rings for the men and unevens for the women. This is Andreas Aguilar of Hanover, West Germany.
Aguilar is very, very powerful, always does a solid job in his ring routines. There's a back roll to a cross. Kip L.
Aguilar was 5th at the 1987 World Championships in this event.
There's his planche press. Giant. Giant to a handstand. Now, this is a neat trick. It goes from a planche, through a Maltese, down to a back lever, and bounce to a cross. Sometimes we call that the elevator. Front uprise to an L. He's very, very solid. He should get a good score, and the crowd is really pulling for him. Giant dislocate. Half in, half out. Took a little hop, but that's a good solid routine.
Fine performance by Aguilar, 4-time German national champion on the rings event.
It's always nice competing in your home country. Giant dislocate. Here's his dismount. It's a tucked half and half out. Really not a very difficult dismount. And he takes a little bit of a hop.
9.75. Sorry, 9.75 was his preliminary score, and there you see 9.875 for his finals, combined for 19.750. Now let's go over to the unevens, where Daniel Silivash, the 17-year-old from Diva, Romania, is getting ready to perform.
Romania was really a big surprise at the World Championships when they pulled off that gold medal, and she's a real stalwart from the team. Right over the low bar, kip to a handstand. Stalled her, full turn, giant, and a Delchev right down to the low bar. Kip to handstand. There's another Stalder with a half turn. Drop kip. Shoots through up to the high bar again. Now it's required. They have to go down to the low bar at least twice in the routine. There's a reverse hecht. Called it Tkachev. And she's getting ready for a dismount now. Giant free hip. Front with a half. Very solid routine.
Her preliminary score was 9.8. And I think the score she'll get for that routine will be just as good, if not better.
And here's a Stalder with a full turn right over the top into a giant. Used to be the giant was the big trick. Now they've got to do a lot more. And here's that Delchev right down to the low bar.
Here's the 2 required moves on the low bar.
That's right. It's become so much like horizontal bar that now the judges have said, look, you've got to do a little bit more down that bottom bar. You can't just do a men's high bar routine. Here's the free hip, front with a half, kick out. Very good dismount, nice and solid.
Daniela Silivash of Romania. Shamus got hit by one of the cameramen. That wouldn't have been funny if he would have hit her. 9.863 the score, the total 19.663. She is our leader right now on the uneven parallel bars. Let's go back to the rings where Stuttgart's very own Jürgen Brummer is ready to perform. 23 years of age.
You think of all the crazy tricks that we do out there and to get knocked off by a camera, boy. Brummer's also very strong on the rings. Of course, he's got the crowd behind him. It's a kip to an L. Not a very difficult mount. Press up to a handstand. Notice how his arms are nice and free from the straps of the rings. That's very difficult to do. Back giant. And here's an inverted cross. Much, much harder than the regular iron cross. And a back giant right to an inverted cross. That's very, very difficult. Front up rise to an L. This is called a hollow back press to a handstand. Giant dislocate. And a double layout dismount. A little bit of a step, but still it was a solid routine.
Little break in the knees, too, on the layout.
That's right.
I noticed that the scores are starting to climb as we look at Franz Heinlein, his coach. The preliminary scores are lower than these final scores.
Especially when you get the crowd behind you and you're the hometown favorite. There's a double out. Does bend his knees at the end and takes that step.
9.65 the preliminary score. Combine that with a 9.825 gives him a total of 19.475. And now it's back to the uneven parallel bars where East Germany's Martina Jentsch. She is from Dresden.
Now look at this mount. A round-off backflip taken from vaulting, I guess. There's your kip to a handstand. Pirouette.
Now,
there's a Jaeger front flip.
Jentsch is tall for a gymnast, as we just saw her toe hit. She's 5 feet 2 inches tall. For an artistic gymnast, that's on the long side.
It is tall. She had some problems there in the low bar on that full pirouette after that free hip circle. Here's a kip. Cast to a handstand. Here's her giants. Free hip front with a half. A little bit of a shaky routine. Not quite as good as her routine in the preliminaries.
9.875 the score in the preliminaries for Jentsch. At the World Championship, she was 7th in this event.
And here's that round-off backflip, kind of like vaulting. Coach has to really pull that board away right away, though. She's going to really bang her heels. And here's this free hip full turn. She gets in some trouble. She isn't quite on top of that handstand. Has to pike down soon.
And the score for Martina Jentsch, 9.88, giving her a 19.763 total. We'll be back with Christy Hinrich of the USA. Hello, bars, and you are looking at Christy Hinrich from the USA.
Here's a kip on the high bar. Cast handstand pirouette. There's a reverse hecht, very high. This is certainly one of Christy's best events. Toe on, toe off. Shoot through. Kip to a handstand. There's a beautiful giant. Very quick. And a toe on, front with a half. It's a very solid routine. It didn't have quite as much difficulty, especially coming out of those giants, where a lot of gymnasts now are doing full turns over the top, and yet she was very solid in that routine.
Christy Hinrich is 4 feet 9 inches tall, which might help her giant situation.
You bet. There's that reverse hecht. Very high over the bars. Probably the best I've seen tonight.
Christy is a sophomore and received a score of 9.738, giving her a total of 19.438. Her preliminary score was 9.7, so 19.438 the total for Christy Hinrich. Now it's back to the rings where Vladimir Shapachkin has just mounted.
Now Shapachkin is very, very powerful on the rings. Pulls through an inverted position. That's called a Yamawaki after a gymnast who did it in the Olympic Games in 1984.
The man to beat.
Inverted cross.
The man to beat is Aguilar. Shapachkin needs a 9.75 to tie him.
And if he saw it, he could get it. He got a very good preliminary score. Iron cross, pull out. Planche press. He's very strong in that planche position, and he uses it not only in rings, but on a lot of the other events. Giant to a handstand. Giant dislocate. And a pike half and F out.
Nice.
Little hop at the end, but very powerful dismount.
9.9 was his preliminary score. And I've just been told that his score is 9.85, giving him a total of 19.75.
Now, I'm really impressed when I see a more difficult dismount done on the rings, because most gymnasts lately have been doing the double layout because he gets full D credit. This is much more difficult. And it's really refreshing to see a difficult dismount like that.
Shapachkin's score holds up, and that